Why is it physically impossible to map Illinois' western border without drawing invisible rivers across dry cornfields, yet perfectly normal for a single flood to kidnap an entire capital city and dump it in another state? Welcome to 71 Dumbest Geographical Errors Found in Modern AI Maps of America's Heartland, where we are exposing the wildest historical blunders, like the time 16 angry counties declared war on the United States, alongside absurd map mistakes about fake lakes named Lake Emoji and the myths you still believe, like thinking the Heartland is perfectly flat. We are settling which jaw-dropping stories are real history and which are just Heartland hoaxes, so smash that subscribe button before a glitchy AI map deletes your whole town too. 1. Wisconsin almost owned Chicago, and almost nobody knows it. Back in 1818, Illinois' northern border was supposed to sit at the southern tip of Lake Michigan, which would have handed the entire future Windy City to Wisconsin. Then a clever Illinois politician quietly shoved the line 61 miles north. Wisconsin lawmakers were furious when they realized what happened. They had basically been robbed of a billion-dollar metropolis with a pen stroke, and they never got it back. 2. A river that flowed the wrong way confused mapmakers for decades. In 1900, Chicago engineers got tired of their drinking water being poisoned by their own sewage flowing into Lake Michigan, so they did something absurdly bold. They built a giant canal and forced the entire Chicago River to reverse direction, draining backward toward the Mississippi instead. Geographers stared at their charts in disbelief. Mother Nature had been overruled by stubborn engineers, and the watershed map of America was rewritten forever. 3. Ever heard of a flood kidnapping an entire capital city? That is exactly what happened to Kaskaskia, the proud town that served as Illinois' very first capital. The Mississippi River turned absolutely violent back in 1881 and tore straight through the narrow land strip holding everything together. Once the angry water finally calmed down, the stunned residents discovered something genuinely bizarre. Their beloved historic town was now floating geographically on the Missouris of the river. They had somehow switched states without ever lifting a single packed suitcase. 4. Picture 16 entire counties getting so deeply insulted that they declared war on their own country. That actually happened in western Illinois back in 1971, when the region noticed it had completely vanished from every state highway funding map. Boiling over with frustration, the angry locals jokingly seceded and proudly crowned themselves the Republic of Forgotonia. A random college student was handed the governor title. War was declared on America, and they surrendered seconds later hoping for relief checks. The hilarious prank somehow actually worked. 5. Some places are dangerous enough that terrified mapmakers flat out refused to draw them. That was the strange fate of Cave-in Rock, a giant limestone cavern along the Ohio River back in the late 1700s. Ruthless river pirates claimed it as their personal fortress, ambushing flatboats and looting terrified settlers drifting helplessly past. Cartographers were so genuinely spooked that they deliberately left the entire spot blank. Praying travelers would never find it. The unlucky pioneers who stumbled inside rarely ever floated back out smiling again. 6. What if your favorite peaceful city park was secretly a graveyard wearing a disguise? Welcome to Lincoln Park in Chicago, where cheerful joggers and picnickers relax above a genuinely dark secret. During the 1850s, that exact land was the official city cemetery, packed tightly with thousands of buried residents. When officials wanted a green park instead, workers moved a few graves and casually shrugged off the rest. For decades afterward, construction crews kept unearthing forgotten coffins and bones. The dead never actually moved out. 7. Imagine a quiet little town casually sitting on top of an ancient cosmic crime scene. Buried deep beneath Des Plaines hides the violent scar of a hypervelocity meteor that smashed into the region ages ago. When curious geologists studied the underground rock layers, their detailed maps turned into complete nonsense. The layers were cracked, flipped, and scrambled around like a shattered jigsaw puzzle. The residents above happily sipped their morning coffee, blissfully clueless that a space rock obliterated their ground. 8. There is a pyramid in Illinois bigger than anything in Egypt, and surveyors confidently called it a hill. Monk's Mound at the lost city of Cahokia actually has a base larger than the famous Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet 19th century Illinois mapmakers casually wandered past this enormous monument and labeled it a natural glacial mound. They genuinely believed ice and dumb luck had piled up all that dirt. A whole vanished ancient civilization built a true wonder, and a glacier stole the credit. 9. Believe it or not, the entire downtown of Chicago is parked directly on a hidden prehistoric lake. Long before the skyscrapers and honking traffic, a massive glacial lagoon spread across the area, now buzzing with busy city life. After the Great Chicago Fire flattened everything back in 1871, developers faced mountains of charred rubble with absolutely nowhere to put it. Their solution was wonderfully simple and slightly insane. They dumped all the burned wreckage straight into the old lake bed and built downtown. 10. Sometimes a single tiny mapping slip-up accidentally creates an entire outlaw kingdom overnight. In 19th century central Illinois, two rival railroad companies laid their tracks slightly apart, leaving a skinny 100-foot strip awkwardly wedged between them. A careless zoning error meant no county ever bothered to claim it. Gamblers spotted the legal loophole instantly, gleefully realizing no sheriff had any power there. Tents full of card games and rolling dice popped up overnight, turning the forgotten strip into a lawless little paradise. 11. Believe it or not, a golden retriever once secretly got his own hiking trail printed on an official map. Back in the 1990s, an Illinois conservation map proudly featured a scenic path called Buster's Path, inviting hikers to explore it. There was just one tiny problem. The trail did not actually exist anywhere on real ground. The cartographer who drew the map had quietly named the imaginary route after his beloved Dogbuster. Confused hikers wandered the woods searching for a path that only existed in one man's heart. 12. Two American states once nearly went to war over a single tree full of bees. In 1839, Illinois and Missouri furiously mobilized armed militias because of a boundary mapping dispute. The entire conflict was sparked by a property marker vaguely described as a bee tree. Nobody could actually agree which tree it meant, or where the buzzing thing stood. Hundreds of armed men stomped toward the border, ready to fight over honey. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed before anyone got stung or shot. 13. One historic pioneer town quietly lost its entire riverfront overnight, and almost nobody saw it coming. Nauvoo was a proud Illinois settlement famous for its beautiful lower limestone flats hugging the river. Then, a massive dam project arrived in the 1960s with very different plans. Engineers flooded the area, and an artificial lake swallowed the historic lower town completely. Old residents stared at the water covering streets they once walked. Their childhood riverfront simply vanished beneath the waves forever. 14. Imagine standing perfectly still in the middle of a bridge and somehow changing which county you legally owe taxes to. That strange situation exists on a stretch of Interstate 39 in Illinois. Thanks to a modern survey alignment glitch, the legal county tax boundary physically shifts right in the center of the bridge. Drivers cruise across completely unaware they just crossed an invisible money line. One half of the bridge wants your tax dollars, and the other half wants them too. 15. Southern Illinois once tried to dramatically rip itself off the state map entirely. Back in 1861, frustrated Southern Illinois Democrats hatched a bold plan to break away from the rest of the state. They wanted to form their very own independent territory called the District of Egypt. The name came from the region's already existing nickname, Little Egypt. Springfield politicians were stunned that an entire slice of their state wanted out. The dramatic secession dream eventually fizzled before any new borders appeared. 16. Here is something nobody expects to hear about famously flat Illinois. Tucked into the northwest corner sits a region called the Driftless Area, and it looks shockingly like Colorado. Steep hills, rugged bluffs, and dramatic valleys roll across the landscape. The reason is wonderfully strange. During the Great Ice Age, the massive glaciers that flattened the rest of the Midwest somehow completely bypassed this exact spot. The land was left untouched, wild, and gloriously bumpy, while everything around it got steamrolled. 17. Travelers passing through Illinois once cruelly assumed an entire town was named as a personal insult. The town in question is called Normal, and outsiders snickered, convinced it was a sarcastic comment about the residents living there. The truth is far less rude and far more boring. The town was actually named after an old teacher training institution known as a normal school. Locals patiently explain this over and over again. Still, the jokes about perfectly normal people and normal never truly stop. 18. A single printing typo once tricked dozens of motorists into driving straight into a marsh. Back in the 1930s, an official Illinois state highway map accidentally featured a road that did not exist. The mistake created a phantom ravine route, leading hopeful drivers somewhere very wet. Trusting their map completely, early motorists followed the printed line with total confidence. Instead of a smooth, scenic road, they found themselves stuck axle-deep in mud and weeds. The typo claimed victim after very soggy victim. 19. The very bottom tip of Illinois has a border that looks like a drunk person drew it. The 37th parallel survey was supposed to create a clean, straight line across the state's southern edge. Instead, it features a bizarre, jagged zigzag that makes no geographic sense at all. The reason is surprisingly simple. The original surveyors relied on a compass that was warped by powerful local iron deposits underground. The metal yanked their needle around, and the crooked border became permanent. 20. There is a chunk of land in the Mississippi River that constantly changes which state owns it. Tower Rock is a famous rocky landmark, and its loyalty depends entirely on the weather. When the river water level drops below flood stage, the rock legally belongs to Illinois. When the water rises high enough, jurisdiction shifts away. Lawyers and mapmakers have long scratched their heads over this watery technicality. The rock simply sits there, switching state allegiance based on the river's mood. 21. Imagine dialing 911 in an emergency and getting help from a county you do not even live in. That is daily life for residents on Plum Island, tucked inside the Illinois River. Thanks to a bridge mapping oversight, the island's emergency services come from an entirely different county across the water. When trouble strikes, help has to travel a strangely roundabout path to reach them. The islanders simply shrug and accept it. Their address says one thing, but their rescuers answer to another. 22. A rebellious 19th century movement once tried to draft its own map and quietly ditch Springfield. The plan was to create a rogue territory, boldly calling itself the state of West Chicago. The whole motivation was beautifully petty. The organizers were furious about paying taxes to the state capital and wanted out completely. They dreamed of drawing fresh, independent borders far away from Springfield's reach. The illegal scheme generated plenty of angry meetings and loud speeches. In the end, the rogue state never got its map. 23. Believe it or not, Illinois is secretly hiding a desert in plain sight. Near the town of Amboy sits the Illinois Sand Prairie, a landscape that looks completely out of place. Massive prehistoric sand dunes roll across the ground like something from the American Southwest. The dunes were dumped there long ago by a powerful Ice Age glacial flood. Visitors expecting endless cornfields are stunned to find shifting sand under their shoes. It is a tiny accidental desert hiding inside the Heartland. 24. Here is a town that was fully built on paper long before a single human lived there. The city of Centralia was completely mapped, gridded, and officially named by a railroad corporation first. Every street, block, and corner existed on blueprints while the actual land sat totally empty. There were no residents, no buildings, and no shops, just a confident plan. The railroad essentially invented a city out of pure ambition and ink. Eventually, real people arrived to fill in the corporate dream. 25. Early French explorers once believed an Illinois river could carry them straight to the ocean. On their old maps, they proudly labeled the Illinois River as the Divine River. They were convinced this magical waterway flowed directly into an eastern sea. The explorers imagined a glorious shortcut connecting them to distant trade and treasure. Reality was far less divine. The river simply meandered through the heartland, leading absolutely nowhere near an ocean. Their hopeful map turned out to be wonderfully wrong. 26. A single sloppy survey mistake once accidentally gave Illinois free lakefront property. During the Northwest Ordinance era, surveyors using a measuring chain made a small error. That tiny slip handed Illinois a 2-mile slice of valuable lakefront land. The catch was that the property legally belonged to Indiana. A blunder with a chain quietly redrew the border in Illinois' favor. Indiana basically lost prime shoreline real estate because someone could not measure straight. Illinois happily kept the unexpected gift. 27. One brand new canal managed to destroy an entire trading post during its very first week of operation. The Saline River Canal was constructed in the 1800s with hopes for booming commerce. Unfortunately, the engineers underestimated the raw power of moving water. Almost immediately, the rushing current grabbed a mapped trading post and dragged it downstream. The building bobbed away while shocked locals watched helplessly. The canal opened, ate a town, and instantly became an embarrassing legend. 28. There is a historic farmhouse where the owners literally sleep and cook in 2 different states. The home sits precisely on the Illinois-Indiana border, with the line running directly through the house. The bedrooms happen to land on the Illinois side, while the kitchen sits squarely in Indiana. So every single morning, The family wakes up in one state and walks into another just to make breakfast. It is a daily border crossing that requires no passport and absolutely no driving. 29. A tiny microscopic hamlet once briefly declared itself the capital of a rebellious republic. The little settlement was called Fandon, and it had a brief, dramatic moment in the spotlight. During an infrastructure funding protest, locals jokingly staged a mock secession. They proudly named Fandon the capital of their imaginary breakaway nation. It was a cheeky stunt designed to grab attention from officials ignoring their roads. The hamlet was barely a dot on any map, yet it became a defiant capital. 30. Imagine highways quietly sinking into the earth every time it rains hard. That is the strange reality across the American bottom, a vast floodplain in Illinois. Hidden beneath the surface are massive underground reservoirs of loose, waterlogged sand. When intense rains hammer the region, that buried sand shifts and gives way. Modern highway maps end up nearly useless as roads visibly settle and sink. Engineers constantly battle the soggy ground. The land itself seems determined to swallow whatever gets built on top. 31. Some places earn their name through a good old-fashioned fistfight. That is the story behind Battle Creek Road in Illinois. While mapping the area, a surveyor got into a heated argument with a group of fur trappers. The dispute centered on a property stake that had mysteriously gone missing from the ground. Words quickly turned into shoves, and shoves turned into actual swinging fists. The brawl became local legend. When the road finally got a name, that violent scuffle by the creek made it permanent. 32. A map company once invented a fake lake named Lake Emoji decades before the word emoji even existed. Back in the 1920s, cartographers used a sneaky trick to catch copycats. They inserted a completely fictional body of water as a hidden copyright trap. If a rival company copied their map, the fake lake would expose the theft instantly. The strange part is the name they accidentally chose. Lake Emoji sat there for years, a phantom puddle, waiting patiently for the future to catch up. 33. Mapmakers in Illinois are sometimes forced to draw invisible rivers across dry cornfields. The reason is a stubborn old law. The state's western river border is legally defined by the river's exact path from 1818. The problem is that rivers refuse to stay still and constantly wander over time. So the modern river flows in one place, while the legal border sits somewhere else entirely. Cartographers must trace ghostly water lines across plowed farmland where no river has flowed in generations. 34. One spring flood once played a real-life game of musical chairs with two entire islands. In 1867, the Wabash River swelled up and unleashed serious chaos. When the raging water finally settled, two islands had completely swapped positions. The land that sat upstream was now downstream, and vice versa. Local farmers stared at their property maps in total disbelief. Their carefully recorded real estate had been physically rearranged by the river. The flood basically reshuffled the deck and walked away. 35. There is a piece of land where you must drive through another state just to reach it. It is called the Lost Peninsula, and it is geographically stranded. Thanks to a bay mapping error, the only land route into this little strip passes through a neighboring state. Residents cannot reach the rest of their own state without crossing the border twice. It is a quirky geographic trap. The peninsula technically belongs to one state, but practically depends on its neighbor for every road trip. 36. A radical political group once tried to slice Illinois clean in half. Back in 1912, these ambitious activists mapped out a proposed 51st state. They wanted to name this brand new state Lincoln, honoring the famous president. Their plan would have completely severed northern Illinois from the southern half. Two states would replace one, with fresh borders carved across the middle. Politicians watched the bold idea with raised eyebrows. The state of Lincoln never came to life, but the dream made plenty of noise. 37. Imagine an entire river simply vanishing into the ground and leaving mapmakers stumped. That is the everyday reality in the Sinking Valley region of Illinois. Massive underground streams flow through the area, but tracing them is nearly impossible. Whole rivers plunge straight down into limestone sinkholes and disappear from sight. Cartographers cannot follow water they cannot even see. The rivers travel secret hidden paths beneath everyone's feet. The valley keeps its watery routes locked away like a buried mystery nobody can solve. 38. A town once lost its original name because of a flat-out fraudulent land deal. Des Plaines was first mapped under the name Rand, honoring one of its founders. Everything seemed perfectly fine until an uncomfortable truth surfaced. A town founder discovered the mapmaker had used a fraudulent land deed in the process. Suddenly, the name Rand felt deeply tainted and embarrassing, so the community stripped it away entirely. The town quietly rebranded itself, leaving the dishonest deal buried in its awkward past. 39. A 1950s roadmap once invented a fake town called Oatmeal, and a cereal company actually fell for it. The cartographers needed something to fill an empty blank space on the map, so they casually printed an imaginary town with the cozy breakfast name. The map looked complete and convincing. Then a breakfast cereal company spotted the name and got excited. Believing Oatmeal was a real place, they tried to purchase the plot of land. The phantom town nearly got bought for marketing. 40. Because one surveyor's rope got wet, an entire riverbed ended up belonging to Kentucky. Back in 1787, surveyors were mapping the southern water border using a measuring rope. Unfortunately, the rope soaked up water and stretched, throwing off their measurements badly. When the dust settled, the flawed survey handed Kentucky legal ownership of the whole Ohio River bed. Illinois owns the riverbank, not the river itself. A damp piece of rope quietly decided the fate of an entire waterway. 41. Imagine a saloon dodging prohibition laws by simply floating to a new address. That actually happened thanks to the restless Mississippi River. One day, the river suddenly shifted its channel and stranded an Illinois saloon on a freshly formed island. With the water now sitting between the bar and the state, the saloon found itself outside Illinois alcohol prohibition rules. Thirsty customers rejoiced at the lucky loophole. The river had basically smuggled an entire drinking establishment to legal freedom overnight. 42. Two states once spent decades arguing over a single island covered in valuable trees. The troublemaker was Wolf Island, and the prize was its lush, money-making lumber. Mapmakers simply could not figure out which state actually owned the place, so the legal battle dragged on year after frustrating year. Lawyers argued, surveyors squinted, and the trees kept happily growing through it all. The whole multi-decade fight came down to confusion over one stubborn island and the timber standing on it. 43. A rebellious frontier settlement once refused to pay taxes by claiming it existed outside the entire map. The group called themselves the Rogue Commonwealth, and they had a bold excuse. They insisted their land sat beyond any officially surveyed United States territory. In their minds, if no map covered them, no tax collector could touch them. It was a wonderfully creative dodge. The settlement enjoyed a brief, defiant existence, smugly convinced that geography itself had set them gloriously free from government bills. 44. Some land in Illinois actively sabotaged early farming maps by leaking oil. The trouble zone was the Cave-in-Rock Fault Zone, a region full of deep cracks and fissures. Through those underground openings, natural oil seeped quietly up into the soil. Hopeful mapmakers wanted to label the area as promising farmland. The oily ground had other plans entirely. Crops struggled and surveys turned messy as the slick earth ruined their tidy agricultural maps. The land simply refused to behave like proper farmland. 45. A broken instrument once left an entire town park tilted slightly off from true north. The town was Buckley, built around a lovely central park meant to anchor the community. Unfortunately, the surveyor's transit tool was broken during the layout. Because of that faulty equipment, the park ended up constructed 3 degrees off from real geographic north. To the casual eye, everything looks perfectly fine, but the whole peaceful park sits quietly crooked, gently rotated by a single piece of malfunctioning gear. 46. An early map maker once invented an enormous fake mountain range right in the middle of flat Illinois. The blunder came from a translation gone horribly wrong. A colonial cartographer misunderstood a Native American myth and somehow turned it into towering peaks. Confidently, he printed a massive fictional mountain range across the central part of the state. Travelers studying the map prepared for a rugged uphill journey. Instead, they found endless flatland and not a single hill. The mountains existed only in mistranslation. 47. There is a spot where Illinois' northern border suddenly drops hundreds of feet for a bizarre reason. The line was supposed to run perfectly straight across the top of the state. Then, a blizzard interrupted the surveyors mid-job. While battling the freezing storm, their measuring chain actually snapped in the brutal cold. The broken equipment threw off everything that followed. The result is a border that runs neat and clean, then jolts dramatically because of one frozen, shattered chain. 48. One earthquake once made the mighty Mississippi River flow completely backward for an entire day. The culprit was the powerful New Madrid earthquake that violently shook the region. The ground heaved so dramatically that the river reversed direction for 24 full hours. Boats spun, water churned, and witnesses thought the world was ending. When it finally stopped, every existing navigation map was suddenly worthless. The river had been rearranged, and cartographers had to start drawing the chaotic new waterway from scratch. 49. Picture a whole town being forced to pack up and move 3 separate times. The unlucky community was Elwood, and its enemy was the relentless river. Every time the town settled into a comfortable grid, the river quietly eroded the ground beneath it. The streets and buildings simply could not hold their footing. So mapmakers redrew Elwood again and again, shifting it to safer soil. The town basically played a long, frustrating game of dodge with the hungry, creeping water. 50. A British rogue once signed his own secret treaty and drew borders that defied every official map. The agreement was called the Muskogee Border Pact, an unrecognized deal with tribal leaders. This bold adventurer simply ignored the colonial governments entirely. He carved out borders that matched no sanctioned survey or official chart. To the established authorities, the whole pact was completely illegitimate. Yet for a brief stretch, those rogue lines existed on paper, quietly mocking the proper maps of the era. 51. Some swamps were so terrifying that mapmakers just gave up and drew a giant warning. That was the case with the Great Mud Trap, a massive historic swamp in Illinois. The soggy ground was so hopelessly impassable that pioneers risked everything trying to cross it. Frustrated cartographers eventually stopped pretending they could map the place. Instead, they slapped a huge red X across the region. The message was blunt and clear. Travelers were strongly advised to turn around and bypass the deadly mud entirely. 52. A town named Bad Axe earned its strange title from a genuinely creepy discovery. A mapping team was busy surveying boundary markers across the region. While inspecting one particular marker tree, the crew found something deeply unsettling. A rusted, broken weapon was embedded deep inside the trunk of the tree. Nobody knew who left it there or what violent story it told. The eerie find stuck in everyone's mind. When naming the place, that ominous buried axe made the decision easy. 53. In the early days of digital mapping, a software glitch quietly erased an entire town. One moment the community existed, neatly displayed on the digital map for everyone to see. The next moment, a coding error wiped it completely off the screen. In its place, the software cheerfully rendered a blank green forest layer. According to the map, the town had been swallowed by imaginary trees. Residents were technically living inside a digital woodland that simply did not exist in real life. 54. Illinois statehood was rushed through Congress so quickly that the official seal got the math wrong. Politicians were in such a hurry to push the state line through. In the chaos, the official state seal map was printed with an embarrassing mistake. It showed the wrong number of original counties for the brand new state. The blunder was carved right into an official symbol of pride. A document meant to represent Illinois forever launched with a basic counting error baked directly into it. 55. One canal project drowned an entire pioneer cemetery because of a single calculation error. Engineers were confidently building a canal, trusting their detailed measurements. Unfortunately, a massive miscalculation completely threw off their water level predictions. When the canal filled, the water rose far higher than anyone planned. It surged over the land and permanently submerged a historic pioneer cemetery. The graves of early settlers vanished beneath 10 feet of water. One bad equation quietly turned a resting place into a lake bottom. 56. There is a place where children cross a state line just to get to elementary school. The culprit is a strange, twisting river loop that created a bizarre land enclave. Families living in this little pocket are technically boxed in by the curving water. To reach their local school, kids must physically cross into a neighboring state and back. The morning commute doubles as a daily border crossing. For students, leaving the state is just part of getting an education. 57. A Revolutionary War general once decided maps were optional and drew his own country. In southern Illinois, this bold general grew tired of following federal rules, so he simply grabbed a pen and sketched out his own independent borders. Within those self-made lines, he declared his entire army completely exempt from federal law. It was an outrageous power grab disguised as cartography. For a brief stretch, one stubborn general convinced himself that drawing a border made him a ruler. 58. Everyone jokes that Illinois is flat, but the starved rock canyons happily prove them wrong. Tucked into the state are a series of deep, vertical sandstone gorges. These dramatic canyons slice into the earth with steep, towering walls. Visitors expecting nothing but pancake-flat farmland are genuinely stunned. Waterfalls tumble and rugged cliffs rise where they least expect it. The canyons completely shatter the lazy stereotype. Illinois quietly hides rugged, breathtaking terrain that looks like it wandered in from another state. 59. Believe it or not, a town got its name because a surveyor lost his expensive equipment in a swamp. The unlucky man was busy mapping the area with his heavy brass transit compass. Somewhere along the soggy route, the valuable instrument slipped from his grasp. It plunged straight into an unreachable swamp and vanished into the muck. The surveyor could only stare helplessly at the spot where it sank. The embarrassing blunder became so memorable that the town of Burt was named after him. 60. A bored cartography intern once smuggled a tiny mouse drawing onto an official state map. Back in 1992, this intern was working on an Illinois state forest map. Somewhere during the long, tedious project, mischief took over. The intern carefully sketched a small, stylized mouse hidden among the map details. It was a private little prank, a personal signature tucked into government work. Anyone studying the official forest map closely enough might just spot the secret rodent quietly, hiding in plain sight. 61. The backbone of every Illinois map is hiding a sneaky little math error. That backbone is the fourth principal meridian, a critical line used to organize the entire state. It seems perfectly reliable until you look closer. Buried within that meridian is a hidden 5-mile correction offset. Surveyors had to insert that jump to fix accumulating measurement mistakes. The result is that local farm plots all sit slightly skewed because of it. The most trusted line on the map quietly carries a built-in stumble. 62. Believe it or not, one canal project secretly relocated water from one ocean basin to another. The troublemaker was the sanitary canal, an ambitious Illinois engineering feat. Before its construction, the Continental Divide map kept the watersheds neatly separated. Then the canal cut straight through and changed everything. Water that once headed toward the Atlantic Basin was now redirected toward the Gulf of Mexico. Engineers had quietly rewritten a fundamental boundary of the continent. A single canal moved water between two giant systems. 63. There is an island in Lake Michigan where modern map apps still draw horse and buggy trails. The island proudly bans cars completely, keeping its old-fashioned charm intact. Visitors get around by bicycle, on foot, or behind a clip-clopping horse. The problem is that modern digital mapping applications expect roads and vehicles everywhere. Confused by the car-free rules, the apps simply display horse and buggy trail routes instead. Smartphones essentially time travel. The moment users open a map, technology meets a place that refuses to modernize. 64. Believe it or not, a stubborn river island once made two states share custody of the same bird-hunting marsh. The marsh sat on shifting ground that the river kept rearranging every season. One year the soggy land leaned toward Illinois, and the next it drifted toward its neighbor. Hunters arrived, each fall genuinely unsure which state's license they needed. Game wardens from both sides showed up and argued in the reeds. The ducks, of course, ignored every border and flew wherever they pleased. 65. Early cartographers once mistook a giant pile of gravel for ancient defensive walls. The pile in question is the Illinois Valley Glacial Moraine, a 20-mile ridge. This long raised ridge formed naturally from gravel dumped by ancient glaciers. To confused mapmakers, the strange formation looked far too organized to be natural. They convinced themselves it was a series of artificial Native American defensive walls. The truth was simply a glacier doing landscaping. Nature built a wall, and humans got the credit. 66. Imagine an entire town being legally ordered to pick up and move 3 miles inland. That was the fate of Shawneetown, the only Illinois city forced into such a dramatic relocation. Maps had placed the original town directly inside a lethal flood basin. After repeated devastation, the federal government stepped in with a firm decree. The community was officially commanded to abandon its dangerous spot. So Shawneetown packed up and rebuilt itself on safer ground, escaping the deadly water for good. 67. A fake transit hub named Lando once haunted official state bus maps for an entire year. The phantom stop appeared because of a simple human slip-up. A graphic designer had created a test text layer while building the map. When the work was finished, that designer completely forgot to delete it. So the imaginary hub named Lando stayed printed and proud for 12 full months. Travelers may have searched for a bus stop that only ever existed as forgotten leftover text. 68. Believe it or not, a stretchy piece of leather once tilted an entire state border. Surveyors mapping Illinois' eastern boundary relied on a leather measuring strap. The trouble was that wet leather stretches significantly when soaked. As the strap absorbed moisture, every measurement quietly drifted off course. The result is a northern half of the state line that tilts incorrectly. A border meant to be precise ended up gently crooked. One damp strip of leather permanently warped the map. 69. Picture an entire river bend drying up into a cornfield within a single month. That strange transformation actually happened in Illinois. The river had been flowing peacefully along its natural curving bend for ages. Then an upstream logging jam suddenly clogged everything and altered the current. With its water supply choked off, the bend simply withered away. In just weeks, flowing water became dry farmable dirt. Farmers later planted corn exactly where boats once would have happily floated by 70. There is a farm where a man can plant his crops in Illinois, but harvest them in Missouri. The oddity comes from the legal boundary of Kaskaskia Island. That state line slices directly through the middle of the farmland, so a farmer plowing his field begins his work firmly in Illinois. By the time he reaches the other end, he has crossed into Missouri. His crops grow across 2 states at once. The harvest technically belongs to a different state than the planting. 71. Believe it or not, an entire village dodged federal property taxes for 12 straight years. The lucky little village sat tucked away in southern Illinois. It happened to fall directly inside a mapping blind spot wedged between 3 counties. Because no county clearly claimed it, no tax collector ever came knocking. The residents quietly enjoyed their accidental free ride for over a decade. Eventually, officials noticed the gap and fixed it. For 12 glorious years, geography itself handed them a tax holiday. And there you have it. 71 geographical disasters that prove Illinois maps are basically held together with bad math, wet rope, and pure imagination. So now we want to hear from you. Which one of these blunders made your jaw drop the hardest? The saloon that floated away from prohibition, or the town that got deleted by a glitch? Drop your answer in the comments and let us know if your home state hides errors this ridiculous. If this video melted your brain even a little, smash that like button and subscribe to Dumbest Things, because the Heartland has plenty more frozen lies waiting to be exposed. We will see you in the next one.